This is a briefing for stakeholders and advocates about food system bills that are under consideration in the new legislative session. We're going to hear about 13 bills in pretty rapid order this afternoon. First, we're going to present 7 bills the collaborative is focusing on. And we'll hear about those from the legislators who filed them, and then another 6 bills or so from advocates who are leading campaigns from other organizations. The idea is to give everyone a sense of the important issues that will be discussed on Beacon Hill this session, and to encourage you to learn more and get involved in advocating for bills that support your communities and support your work. All of these bills support the goals of the Massachusetts Local Food Action Plan. In fact, many of them were written in response to the recommendations made in the plan, and some were generated as a result of listening sessions the collaborative did last summer that generated our perspectives on resilience and recovery report. We're going to save questions and answers for the end, but please use the chat or the question and answer function for questions as we go along, and we'll collect them and pose them to presenters at the end. We'll share the slides with everyone. They're actually available on our website now, and we'll also share the recording of the video when we're done. We are recording this. So with that, we'll start off with the first bill we're talking about, which is called an Act Supporting the Commonwealth's Farmers, and that's been introduced by Senator Commerford and Rep. Blais. Senator, Rep.
Nice to see you, Winton. It's good to be here alongside my incredible partner, Senator Joe Commerford. And it's good to be with all of you here today who clearly share these goals. This is a really comprehensive piece of legislation looking to support farmers across the Commonwealth. This is my second term. I was just elected last session was my first term. And if there's one thing that became really clear to me is, to the extent that we're able to look at these issues holistically, we should. This bill really looks at how we can support a wide variety of farmers throughout the Commonwealth, meeting them where they are and providing them with the support that they need to succeed. This provides very specific technical support through the Circuit Rider program. It provides some tax relief, not relief, but changes that will tax processing infrastructure at ag value and looks at those non-contiguous parcels. We know that our farmers are going in between these smaller parcels throughout our districts. And so taking a look at that taxation is really important. Something I know that we are recognizing now clearly is the need to incorporate food production capacity and disaster planning. This would develop plans for supporting agricultural, seafood, and processed food production in its emergency preparedness planning efforts to mitigate the impacts of food supply chain disruptions. Those are only a couple of pieces of this bill that really looks to support our farmers across the Commonwealth. And I'm so happy to have been able to work with Senator Commerford on this, who's really taken a lead and is a fierce advocate for farmers across the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Rep. Blais. Thanks, Winton and everybody. The representative said it beautifully. I think what I would just want to double down on is that we understand that provisions that can really help farmers and really support food security need to be varied because there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. So we need to create almost a toolkit of options for farmers. And this is just one bill in the many that you're going to hear about today that Winton has been supporting, that our colleagues have been working on now for many sessions, some new. But it really is incumbent upon us to recognize the complexity of farming in the 21st century and to recognize the distinct and different ways in which farmers will seek and receive or need support. So this is one attempt in that vein to put it together, put some of the puzzle pieces together. Again, these are not all the puzzle pieces that we need to think about as a legislature by any means. So thanks for that great overview, Representative.
Thanks, Senator Commonford and Rep. Blais. I'll add that many of the sections of this bill are supported directly by recommendations from the food plan, particularly the circuit rider program pointed out as the need for more non-regulatory interaction between farmers and the department. Definitely the need for more education. And so that grant program is a big step in that direction. And the last bullet point here, the idea of NEMA working more directly with farmers and food producers obviously came out of the COVID crisis. It's clear that there's a lot of work that's done in disaster relief planning in Massachusetts for how we get food to people, but not a lot of looking at how we produce food and actually can redistribute what we can produce here in Massachusetts. And so this would help to alleviate that gap. The next bill under consideration, an act regarding a farmland protection and viability action plan. This has been, was introduced in the last two sessions as well by Senator Goby, and is also being sponsored this session by Rep. Blais. Senator?
Yeah, thanks, Winton. And thanks because this absolutely came from the work that you folks did when we put this through. And I want to thank Natalie and Hannah and Joe and all our good partners on the support for this. Basically, one of the big things on this is really to do some data collection, because we really have to kind of figure out where the farmland is, where the best farmland is, as well as, you know, taking a look. I know it doesn't kind of enumerate it in here, but I think it's also important that we look at areas that had been used for farming that may be underutilized or totally out of production now. And so it's really to kind of do some priorities. The other part is that there's a lot of state regulations, and there's, not to use too much of a farming term, but there are all these like individual silos. And one of the big things that we hear all the time, you know, people don't communicate. And that is one of the big issues, that there's just not a lot of continuity in the programs right now. So part of this too is to bring things together and to get some of that continuity and to make sure that going forward that we have something very viable in place and to make priorities. So I'm hoping that this will be the year. And of course, because of COVID, you know, we saw the real gaps in our food chain, and, you know, extremely important, you know, agriculture, I think was kind of the unsung hero and heroine during all of this, and really providing direct links to people. And this is just one way that we can do something, to put something in place that will make an absolute big difference and set policy and priorities going forward. Because I think that's really important. You know, we're in the 21st century and we're still dealing with kind of 20th century ways that we do things, and we can't do that anymore.
Thank you, Senator. Anything to add, Rep. Blais?
I just want to thank Senator Goby for her efforts in moving this forward. She's a tremendous advocate and a really strong supporter for our farms. We've been on quite a few farms together, Senator. And I just want to point out is something that we talk about often is a need for data and goals and benchmarks. And if we don't have those things, we are never going to be successful as a Commonwealth. And that, I think, is one of the most important pieces of this legislation, is it does establish those very necessary pieces, and will allow the Commonwealth really to address that food security, the public health, energy, climate change. You know, all of those goals and needs require that intricate level of information. And that's why I'm so excited about supporting this bill on the House side.
Thank you to both of you for filing this. Next up is a bill related to HIP. This is not about the budget, but an act that would actually encode the program in statute. And this is Senator Goby again, and Representative Mark on the House side, who I don't see here, but indicated to me he might not be able to make it. So Senator Goby, to you again.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty basic as well. I mean, it's just to put it into statute. You know, every year we fight for HIP and for more HIP funding. And this is really just to get it into statute. So, you know, it takes care of maybe one part of the problem that we face every single year, but also will set up a fund so that people, private, public, so we can get money into HIP as well to continue to support it. And again, I do want to thank all my colleagues, because this has been I don't know. I would say it's probably our #1 issue. Would you guys agree with that? I think for the food, for our caucus as well. And so I feel good about it. Let's hope we can get it into statute, because I think that makes the most sense.
I think this is the 3rd session it's been introduced, and I think it's last year or last session had more co-sponsors than just about any other bill. So maybe this is the year for it. Next up is a new bill introduced by Senator Commonford and Rep. Blais, an act promoting equity in agriculture. Senator, Rep.
Yeah, I think, all of us on this call recognize that there are some critical inequities in the Commonwealth's food and agriculture system that really need to be explored and addressed. And one of the best tools that we have to address this is through an examination of programs and policies at MDAR. They're incredible partners, and I see them as wanting to come on board with us on this. This commission ensures that we include more voices at the table, and as I just talked about data, that we have the data necessary to set those policies and goals that are really going to bring more people to the table, include more voices there, and really address the future of farming in Massachusetts.
I'll just pile on to what Rep. Blais said so beautifully, and thank you, Winton, for provoking this, and thank you to MDAR for just being so interested in looking toward the future. The summary here really says it all, right? That people of color who are farmers are representing 2.3% of the Commonwealth's farms, despite the fact that people of color are 29% of the state population. That in itself, in the 21st century, as we look to the future of farming and keeping the sector robust and moving forward and relevant and strong, should give us some pause, should strike some alarm. And so this, as this in the 21st century, in 2021, with everything that's upon us in terms of wanting to learn the lessons about inequities that we learned painfully during COVID, and wanting to chart a more equitable, just, sustainable, resilient, healthy future, just that alone should be enough to really talk about why this bill is critical right now. And then on top of it, it's, is this charting a stronger future of farms and a stronger ability to keep our economies local and diverse and serving an increasingly diverse public. So I love this bill, and I'm so glad to work on it with Rep. Blais and love her passion for it.
Thank you to both of you. It was a team of folks that came together to work on developing this bill, and Norris Guscott, who's a leader of Lynn's Food Security Task Force and the director of the Lynn Food and Fitness Alliance, was instrumental in that group. And I want to ask Norris to say a few words about this bill.
Thanks, Winton. Thanks, Senator Commonford and Rep. Blais and everyone. It's a pleasure to speak with you all today about this bill. So this bill was developed via a gathering of the minds approach by the Mass Food System Collaborative, who sought the expertise of those who directly engage with and serve historically and socially disadvantaged groups, as mentioned in the bill. The minds behind this bill bring vast and unique backgrounds such as food and ag policy, public health and impact analysis, community organizing, and advocacy, to name a few. And we really feel this bill is a step towards addressing some of the root inequities in agriculture and food policy. I mean, we can see some of the technical points on the slide, right? But let's break down the importance a little bit more into the nitty gritty. The bill is important to food and ag policy because both areas have direct correlations to health and socioeconomic status. And both of those areas are rife with inequity. I mean, has anyone here ever had to explain to a class of socially disadvantaged third graders that an eggplant comes from a plant and not chickens, or having to, answer a hall full of socially disadvantaged parents demanding to know why supermarkets are so far away and expensive, while there are 3 or 4 fast food places close by, or having to continually look at data that shows that socially disadvantaged groups suffer from food insecurity and food-related diseases at 2 to 3 times the rate of those who aren't socially disadvantaged. I've had to, and I'm currently are doing that as part of my job, and it gets old. But we believe this bill will begin to address some of those root causes of inequity by putting in place a commission on agricultural equity to develop recommendations for supporting, those racially equitable investments, policies, and practices to promote equity in agriculture in the Commonwealth. And if this bill goes into law, we believe it's going to get results because instead of reinventing the wheel, it relies on this commission, who's composed of leaders in ag and food equity, to study existing laws, regulations, and programming, and to make those equity recommendations to MDAR, who's been an amazing partner. As everyone mentioned earlier on the topic of data, the ability of the commission, or this commission, to launch new studies and data analysis is critical given the lack of data in this area. We need to know problems exist in order to launch the most effective initiatives. For example, what little research that does exist shows that with the right mediating institution, equity in agriculture can actually improve economic circumstances for socially disadvantaged via jobs transferable skills, spending less on produce, and starting a farm. But as a public health researcher, leader of a municipality's food security task force, and a Black man, belonging to a historically socially disadvantaged group, I've seen these areas of ag equity and food security through many lenses, and I know this bill has the potential to address many of those root causes of inequity when it comes to that, and I urge you all to support it. And thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all again.
Thank you, Norris, and thank you for your work on making the bill as good as it is.
Pleasure as always, Winton. Our pleasure.
Thanks, Norris.
Next up is a bill that addresses food waste, and this has been introduced for a number of sessions again by Representative Kane and Senator Commonwealth.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Winton, for holding this session. This is a really critical opportunity for all of us to get better informed about the bills that are out there. And it's wonderful to see my fellow colleagues who are food system champions on here this afternoon. This is a bill that has been around. I have filed it for 3 sessions. It was filed before that by former Senator Eileen Donoghue. And it's a bill that doesn't have any organized opposition to it. There's no downside. It just simply, for whatever reason, gets sent out of committee each year with a favorable report and then dies in Ways and Means. So we're going to continue to do our work to push this bill over the finish line. But very succinctly, it removes another barrier that exists to food donations and ensures that these protections are extended to restaurants, organizations, and individuals who wish to donate. And it importantly also has an environmental consequence. We're putting less food into landfills, and it's going to folks. It is still good food, and it can be donated to those who are hungry. In addition, this year we made an important change. In the past, we filed it was a tax deduction for farmers, but thanks to Winton and the advocacy of others, we've changed that this year to be a tax credit, better recognizing the value for farmers in this and hoping again that it can provide an incentive for farmers to donate crops, which might otherwise just go fallow into the field by ensuring that they have a way to recoup some of the cost of having harvested those crops to donate. So grateful for the opportunity and certainly throw it over to Chair Comerford for any additional comments.
There's no way I could have said it better. Thank you to Rep. Kane for leading this for so long. I've loved joining you. I loved joining you last year. I love that it's coming back this year again, and I love that we've turned it to a tax credit. I add my thanks to Winton. I think it's just that much more immediately understandable about the kind of benefit this could bring for our farmers. And this bill, as Rep. Kane said so well, has no organized opposition. We really do have to propel it forward. It's one important tool in this toolbox that we have to provide, the legislature has to provide to our farmers and our food security network to make it that much more resilient and lasting into the future.
Thank you to both of you for refiling this bill. Next up is a new bill, but by no means a new issue, about the issue of a lack of infrastructure for meat processing in the state. And this is something that Senator Goby's been aware of for a long time, talking about for a long time, and Representative Blais has introduced it in the House. So I'll leave it to the two of you to explain.
Anne, you want to go first? You want me to go first? Okay. So this is something we've all heard about for years and years and years. Our livestock farmers have expressed concerns with a lack of options that are available for creating and customizing these value-added meat products, not only here in Western Massachusetts, but across the entire Commonwealth. We've heard the concerns about excessive travel to and from processors, the need for technical assistance, shortage of data, on demand for local meat products, and all of these things have continued to linger out there for quite some time. So this bill begins to look at that. It would establish the state and meat inspection program that would begin to address these issues with a goal of ensuring that farmers, that MDAR and DPH are all at the table working together, and that they are engaged in that program development and operation. So I think this is a great step forward in terms of addressing these concerns, again, that we've heard from livestock farmers for a very long time. As our farmers are working to diversify, they do need those tools in their toolbox, and this is another way to do that.
And just on that, I think that especially during this crisis, that one of the weakest links that we saw in the food supply chain was this. If you look nationally, what happened in some of the food processing plants and the COVID that went through and the disruption. So this bill, I think it's a one-sentence bill, at least mine is. I'm not sure if yours is a little different, Natalie, or not. But basically, it says that DPH shall enter into an agreement with USDA. And so we really want to kind of get the ball rolling on this because it needs to be done. And love your support as always. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. And then finally, a bill introduced by Rep. Donahue called an act supporting the Commonwealth's food system about establishing a new staff position that will try to coordinate a lot of the food programs in the state. Rep. Donahue?
Yeah, thank you, Winton, and so good to see some of my great colleagues and some of the great legislation they filed. Working with Winton and the Food System Collaborative, we filed this bill to really basically look at how do we coordinate better. I think Senator Goby said it great earlier, using her analogy about so often so much of the food system is in silos and between different departments, different commissioners, different secretariats, in different organizations. And how do we basically kind of get somebody who's going to wake up every day and kind of think about how do we better collaborate across the different departments and different commissioners and different secretariats, whatever it might be at the state, and basically think each day, how do we kind of close the gap, make sure that we're not duplicating efforts and focusing in on exactly how to best serve the food system. And I think, the COVID crisis has showed how important working together is. I think the Food Security Task Force, the great work that Representative Kane and Senator Comerford have done on there, has showed how we need to basically be better at collaborating together, and to have a single person in that position to do that each and every day, I think would be a great help to the food system and to the farmers and to the people who are benefiting from local food throughout the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Rep. This was something that was definitely called out in both the food plan from 2015 as well as in the perspectives report from October. Thank you to all the legislators who participated in the first half here. We hope you can stick around to answer some questions. And we'll stick around to hear from the 5 advocates that are going to talk about some of their bills next. And we're going to start that section with Jen Lemmerman from Project Bread. She's going to introduce us to the Universal School Meals Bill. Jen.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much, Winton, for having me here. And thanks to everyone, all the legislators on the call and all of the attendees as well. I'm here to talk about a new piece of legislation, an act relative to universal school meals. You can see the bill numbers there, as we have been calling it, School Meals for All. This legislation is sponsored by Senator DiDomenico and Representative Vargas. And you know, this is really a bill that for us, we see as a necessary step along the road to addressing childhood food insecurity here in Massachusetts. And, you know, ever since the start of the pandemic, the issue of food insecurity and childhood food insecurity in particular has really had a spotlight placed on it. And, you know, rightfully so, it is absolutely a crisis, and it's one that has increased so much over the last year. So we're now in a position where 1 in 5, just over 20%, so a little more than 1 in 5 households with children here in Massachusetts reports food insecurity and not having reliable access to a sufficient amount of nutritious meals and food for them and their families. So that is a crisis. And as most people on this call are aware, right now, all children in the state, and in fact across the country, can access free school breakfast and lunch as a result of waivers on the federal level that were really put in place, as you know, by the federal government, implemented by the state government and by municipalities, as a recognition that at a base level, children need access to the nutrition that is necessary for them to grow and thrive and learn. But what we know is that in the system that we had prior to these waivers, lots of kids were falling through the cracks. As you'll see on the slide, 27% of food insecure children were not eligible for free or reduced price meals prior to this crisis and prior to these waivers. So this legislation, there's considering what it does, there's 3 fairly simple provisions, which would require schools to make breakfast and lunch available to all students at no charge to themselves or their families, and with no requirement to prove need. It would require that cost of providing meals be covered by a combination of federal reimbursements and state funding. And then while we're doing that, making sure that we're maximizing the federal dollars that are available, and also getting as many families enrolled in the SNAP program that need it by working along with schools to do outreach to families through the students' families to make sure that they are enrolling in SNAP, which then qualifies them for free school meals that are reimbursed by the federal government. There is a coalition, the Feed Kids Coalition, that it has come together in support of this bill, and lots of people who are on this call right now are members, so thank you very much. The Mass Food Systems Collaborative, the food banks, MLRI are all members, and we also have some wonderful support from a broad group of coalition members, such as the Mass General Hospital for Children, the faith community through JALSA, the United Way, the YMCAs, and businesses such as the State Street Corporation and Bay State Milling. So we would love to have those of you on the call join us. You can find the information down at the bottom of the slide, feedkids.org, or reach out to us at the action team at projectbread.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And on our website, which has been posted a few times in the chat already, you'll see links to Project Bread and to all the other organizations that are presenting on their bills here. Next up is Pat from the Mass Law Reform Institute talking about the SNAP gap and the Common App legislation. Pat?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and huge thank you to Senator Goby, Senator Comerford, Rep. Donahue, everybody on the call. Really appreciate all you are doing in this space. We are doing a refile of the SNAP Gap. Sorry, getting a picture in front of mine. The SNAP Gap campaign. This is to remind folks, these are the households receiving mass health benefits under 150% of poverty who are eligible for but not receiving SNAP. We did have a very successful FY21 budget effort where we got language into the FY21 budget that moves this issue along, but it does not amend the state statute permanently, which is our goal here. The state is working now to try and take some preliminary steps towards getting the mass health population access to SNAP. We would like a permanent change, an actual change in the technology so that it is seamless when people apply for healthcare to access SNAP benefits. We know that's going to be a cost to the state, but we also know that the benefit of getting these 100% federal dollars back into people's pockets is key. This is filed by Rep. Jay Livingstone and Senator Sal DiDomenico. It also includes a provision that we want to highlight for you of allowing people who are on SNAP to also apply for cash assistance benefits. In a data request we got from the state recently, there's 22,000 families with children in Massachusetts who simply do not have any cash assistance at all, 22,000, which is pretty stunning. And when there's 27,000 families getting TAFDC, we know that these families are hurting and could benefit from the cash assistance programs. And then finally, we are hoping to move the state towards a more common, robust application for all the means tested programs, much like the state has done for small businesses, where they've created a common single portal for small businesses to apply for grants. We are hoping the state will allow low-income consumers to have the same experience. I did just want to tag one bill that Rep. Donahue has filed along with Senator Ed Kennedy from Lowell, which is an act to allow Massachusetts to participate in the federal restaurant meal program. We don't have a fact sheet on this. This was filed on Friday. And what it would mean is that Massachusetts could join states like California, Arizona. There's even a pilot going on in Rhode Island of letting people who are 60 and over, persons with disabilities and homeless individuals use their SNAP benefits for a hot meal. This is a federal option. We don't do it in Massachusetts. We think it would support the restaurant industry as well as allow people who have difficulty cooking to access hot meals using their SNAP benefits. So I'm just putting a tag on that bill as well. Thank you, Winton.
Thank you, Pat. Next is Laura. Laura is from the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, and she's going to talk about two bills that they're working on. One about the cliff effect and one about the Hunger-Free Campus Initiative. Laura.
Hi, thanks, Winton. Thanks for having me here, and thanks to all of the legislators who are filing all these fantastic bills. There is so much great legislative work being done in our Commonwealth. So I'm going to talk about two different bills that we are working on at the Food Bank of Western Mass. The first one is to end hunger on college campuses. Everybody knows the trope of college students eating ramen, or if you want to have a successful event at a college, you just serve pizza and people will show up. But when you drill down a little bit further into that, it's really not a joke. There are a very high number of students in the Commonwealth that are food insecure. 37% of all public university students in Massachusetts are food insecure. And those numbers are even higher for Black, Latinx, LGBTQ students. It's 52%, 47, and 46 respectively. And then student parents also experience food insecurity at really high rates, around 53%. So obviously it's very hard for college students to stay in school to focus on their studies if they're worried about where their next meal is coming from. So this bill is a first-time file. It's being filed by Harriet Chandler, Senator Chandler in the Senate, and by Reps Andy Vargas and Mindy Dahm in the House. And it creates a grant program for campuses to address food insecurity for students. And it also creates an office within the Department of Higher Ed that will oversee this program and do capacity building. And the money can be used for a variety of different events, like hunger awareness events. It directs colleges to establish a hunger-free campus task force. There are other programs that it does, like developing a student meal credit sharing program, dedicating staff people within the school to deal with, help students with food insecurity, help them sign up for SNAP, let them know that they're eligible for SNAP and other benefits, establishes either an on-campus food pantry or partners with a local pantry, depending on where the school is located. So I am gonna plop my email into the chat. And if anybody's interested in joining this coalition, please contact me. So it's the the food banks, MLRI, some other anti-hunger advocates, and then a number of representatives from state colleges, both 2 and 4 year, who are part of this coalition. And we're really excited to be working on this bill. And then the next one is creating a pilot program to deal with the impacts of the cliff effect. So this is the cliff effect is what happens when people who are working at a minimum wage or a low wage job don't take a raise or aren't able to get a better job because the loss of the benefits like housing or SNAP or childcare, that when they get the increase in the pay, they end up being worse off than they were before when they lose those benefits. So this, it's a major problem that keeps people from being able to better their lives and to get out of poverty. And so this program would create a 3-year pilot program for 100 low-income working families using the mass earned income tax credit as a way to make up the difference for the loss in those benefits. So this is a really exciting bill. It's the second time it's been filed. It's with Eric Lesser in the Senate and Reps Pat Duffy and Carlos Gonzalez in the House. And we are really excited about this bill too. This one had a lot of good support in the last session. It got through its committee, and then it, at the end of the session with all the COVID, distraction, it didn't get past the Ways and Means, but we're really hopeful that it's going to be, get over the finish line in this session. And I'm also happy if you want to contact me about this, we would love to have your support on this one as well.
Thanks, Laura. Next is from Mass Farm to School. Simca Horowitz is going to talk about the bill that they introduced last session and have brought back again this session, a Farm to School grant program. Simca?
Great, thanks so much for having me here, and everyone for all this really great advocacy. So this is a pretty straightforward bill. It's the whole title is an act establishing farm to school grants to promote healthy eating and strengthen the agricultural economy. So what it would do is create a competitive grant program within the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to fund startup or expansion of farm to school activity. That could be things like infrastructure investments. We routinely hear that schools are interested in doing more scratch cooking, but don't necessarily have the kitchen equipment to make that possible. It can fund professional development, be that for school nutrition staff who may need additional training to be able to do that kind of incorporation of local foods, or similarly professional development for educators interested in doing things like garden-based learning. And one thing that is sort of new this year, this was filed in the last session. This year, the eligibility is for both public K through 12 schools and early education and care sites that participate in the child and adult care feeding program. So some expanded eligibility there. It was filed by Senator Lesser and Representative Pignatelli. I've seen some comments in the chat around sort of the universal meals and language in there around quality. And I think this is a really nice kind of companion to the universal meals bill, in that this is an effort really focused on helping schools have the resources and training that they need to actually be able to serve high quality foods that do incorporate local foods. So we will be, in terms of opportunities to get involved, you can check out our website, massfarmtoschool.org/policy. We're going to be holding a session kind of similar to this on March 9th with some more discussion about kind of next steps for advocacy on this bill if you're interested in getting involved. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Simca, and thank you for pointing out the interplay between this bill and the Universal School Meals Bill. I think a lot of the legislation that's been introduced this session really supports each other, and so we're looking forward to working on all of these bills together. And last but certainly not least, Kristen Sukis from Food is Medicine Mass is going to talk about the Food and Health Pilot Program.
Thanks, Winton. And I just tried my video, but I think it's turned off. Okay, great. Like others, really happy to be here today. Really humbling to be amongst such great advocates in the state. So my name is Kristen Sukis, and I'm a policy analyst with the Center for Health Law and Policy Innovation. And together with Community Servings, we co-lead FIMA, or Food is Medicine Massachusetts, which is a coalition of over 80 organizations working to create a healthcare system in the state that recognizes and responds to the relationship between health and food. So we're really excited to announce that Senator Julian Cyr and Representative Denise Garlick have reintroduced, this is the second year, an act relative to establishing a food and health pilot program. So the legislation would require Mass Health to establish a food and health pilot program to demonstrate the impact of offering a suite of medically tailored nutrition services for Mass Health enrollees diagnosed with specific health conditions. As we all know, and as we all can agree here, rates of diet-related chronic disease have been far too high in Massachusetts for far too long and are definitely expected to worsen. Before COVID-19, 56% of all deaths and 53% of all healthcare costs in Massachusetts were associated with chronic disease. Throughout the COVID-19 crisis, as we all know, conditions like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, cardiovascular diseases have been found to dramatically increase individual and community vulnerability to severe COVID-19 infections and also hospitalizations. And now delayed medical care, unemployment, skyrocketing food insecurity, all consequences of the dual public health and economic crises paint a grim picture of the coming burden of chronic disease across Massachusetts, and namely for individuals and communities of color. So given the impact of diet-related chronic disease on health, it's imperative that our healthcare system not only reimburses for food and nutrition services that can address these conditions, but that a spectrum of nutrition services are available to meet individual need, and that healthcare providers are prepared and our systems are equipped to respond to that individual need. So the Food and Health Pilot Program would require one healthcare facility to provide referrals to 3 types of medically tailored nutrition services: medically tailored meals, or medically tailored meal program, medically tailored food program, and then nutritious food referrals, which includes produce prescription programs. So to be eligible for the pilot, Mass Health enrollees must be food insecure and diagnosed with at least one health condition, including congestive heart failure, type 2 diabetes, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, renal disease, prediabetes, obesity, overweight, or hypertension. And based on illness profile, qualifying participants will receive one of the 3 medically tailored nutrition services for at least 16 weeks. The legislation states that Mass Health shall determine the appropriate number of participants, that they may establish additional eligibility requirements, and that they may extend services additionally to members of the participants' households, like caregivers, spouses, or dependents. At the end of the pilot, Mass Health would be required to evaluate the impact of this program compared to a control group on total healthcare costs, emergency department utilization, hospital admissions and readmissions, pharmacy costs, and clinical and non-clinical outcomes, which could include blood pressure, hemoglobin A1C, cholesterol, mental health indicators, quality of life, and food insecurity. The legislation also calls for the creation of a Food and Health Pilot Research Commission that will help Mass Health with design and implementation. So the Research Commission will include representatives of state agencies like the Office of Medicaid, Department of Public Health, Health Policy Commission, Elder Affairs, and MDAR. And additionally, 15 seats will also be appointed by Mass Health and will include other experts in the field. Overall, you'll see at the bottom of the slide here, there's 3 goals of the pilot. Number 1, to evaluate the impact of offering a suite of nutrition services on healthcare utilization and costs. Number 2, expanding access to food as medicine services across the state. And number 3, enhancing the ability of our healthcare system to provide appropriate nutrition services based on individual patient need. So as Massachusetts prepares for higher rates of chronic disease in the coming future, we think it's really imperative that we begin equipping our healthcare system to address this broad spectrum of these conditions effectively, efficiently, and also comprehensively. So you can find more information on the bills at foodismedicinema.org, as well as the bill numbers themselves, which are on the slide. And, to support the bill, we encourage all of you to just, talk about it in your networks, write to your legislators about the importance of this legislation. And of course, you can reach out to me to join our mailing list to learn about opportunities to kind of advocate and support this bill too. My email's on the bottom right of this slide, but I can also put it in the chat as well. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Kristen. Exciting to see this bill getting traction again this session.
Thanks, Winton.
So what's next? These bills have all been introduced. You'll see they're all labeled with HD or SD numbers. That means docket. But soon they'll be assigned bill numbers, HB or SB, and that will apply to them. Those numbers will apply to them for the rest of the session, and they'll be assigned to committees, which will consider how to move them through the process. Committee hearings will begin in a couple of months, and that's when there will be opportunities to submit written and oral testimony in support of or in opposition to bills, or to offer suggestions about how bills could be made stronger. As Senator Goby said about one of the bills, and I think it's true of all of them, there's no downside. And in a lot of cases, there's no cost. And in most cases, there's no opposition to any of these bills. So and Conan asked a good question about what makes them stall. And I think some of these things stall. It's not about opposition. It's the many worthy programs argument, that there's a lot of programs that are being considered, a lot of different issues at play, and those that get the most attention are those that end up moving forward. And so along those lines of most attention, where we're at now that these bills have been filed, is that we don't have to wait. We can start asking our legislators to co-sponsor any of these bills. And because the number of co-sponsors on bills really demonstrates the amount of support that there is. Deadlines have been extended this session, but there's really no reason to wait. If legislators hear from a lot of people this week about food system bills, that's going to help to really set the tone and generate some momentum this session. If you're not sure of who your legislators are, there's a handy tool at malegislature.gov, which is linked to from our page that's been in the chat a few times as well, where you can type in your address and you can get the legislators' contact information. The collaborative also has a list of legislators with all their contact information and social media handles on our website. So that's all in the food systems bills page section on the legislature page. There's the link in the chat right there. We'll be sending an email around tomorrow morning to everybody who is here with those links, as well as links to everybody who just participated from other organizations, including a link to those for the form for those who want to sign on to our white paper. We do this white paper every year. A lot of you have signed on in the past, and it's a chance to demonstrate your support for the 7 initial bills that we talked about. And we circulate that around to legislators, and it's a really great way to demonstrate how much breadth of support there is for important pieces of legislation. And the bills page on the website also has links to the pages of all the other advocates, as I said, so you can reach out to them and find out how to best support their efforts. And finally, I'll add, we've talked about a dozen or so bills this afternoon that all of our respective organizations are focused on. There have been more than 6,500 bills filed so far, several hundred of which are directly about food and agriculture and food access. And we're still working on analyzing a lot of them. And there are also bills about climate change and land use, transportation and labor and other issues that could have a direct impact on our food system. And you can follow our social media, our website, and subscribe to our newsletter to get updates as other legislative issues arise. Just gotten some questions in the chat that I wanted to give some folks a chance to answer. Senator Commonwealth, are you still with us?
I am here.
There's a technical question from Kathy Orlando about the APR section of the omnibus bill. And the first bill covered, does the value of APR purchases, bullet point, mean wanting to increase the amount of funding provided to MDAR to use in purchasing APRs, which would be great since the value is set by appraisal based on market value. So the values have gone up while the APR program has not gotten increasing amounts of funding to enable them to keep up with the demand. Instead of having to do less APRs with the small amount of funding while the values have been going up.
You know what, Winton, I was getting the, I think, come back to me. I'm gonna look at the question, read it myself and pull up the bill so I can be smarter. I couldn't do all of that at the same time. So just come back to me if there's time. And I'm happy to pull up the bill and read it just so I could be smart.
That absolutely sounds fair. I'm scanning questions. We've answered a lot of them by typing them, typing answers. A question, I know I saw it and I'm trying to find it. This would be a question for any of the caucus chairs. Kanan pointed out that we've learned from the food crisis caused by COVID-19 about some real underlying economic inequities, and how will this session's bills address those inequities, either indirectly or directly? Anyone from any caucus chairs like to talk about how the slate of bills this session are working to address inequities?
I'm happy to jump in if other chairs are, you know, I know that folks have many other meetings.
Take it away, Joe.
All right, my sister.
Go ahead, Joe.
I'll start. Or what did you just say, Hannah?
Oh, I said, please go ahead.
All right, I'll kick it off. You know, what's the best thing I think about, and I really want to just cheer my fellow colleagues who are in the Food Systems Caucus leadership. The best thing about the Food Systems Caucus is that we are totally bottom-up member driven, meaning that we are going to look like everybody else is looking at the key legislation that's in. As Winton said, these are just some of many, many farm and food security bills that have been filed. And there's a process by which we will meet again, and we will hear from members about their key legislation. And we'll go through a process of taking the temperature, if you will, of where the key bills are. I think clearly, just from some of the legislation that you've pulled out, Winton, there is a vein of concern and a much greater foregrounded focus on equity, especially race and ethnicity. You know, so equity centered around race and ethnicity, but certainly also around chronic poverty. And so, you know, I think there's a shared commitment on the part of not only the chairs of the Food Systems Caucus, but the members in the legislature to really forge a better intersection for us around food and farm security and equity, which will be done through a prioritization process where all voices will be integrated, and where advocates actually have a great deal to say, right? So if advocates are telling their representatives that these bills that center equity are critical to get prioritized by the Food Systems Caucus, then those members are going to be interested in raising their voices about either the bills they filed or the ones that they are, or that they're hearing about. So I think it's a very, very bottom-up process, and clearly a focus, a necessary focus this session.
Thank you, Senator. And did you have a chance to read the APR question?
I did not see the APR. I was looking for the APR question, Winton. If you could ping it, that would be great. And I'm opening the bill.
Oh, I see. It's under the answered tag now.
Yeah. I don't understand where to find it. So
the question is, does the value of APR purchases, it really brings up the question that the bill talks about how to adjust some values, but I'm sort of answering it here, but it doesn't address how much money is being programmed each year for APR. And so you want to talk a little bit about the interplay between how we work with the governor to get more money in the capital budget for more APR purchases, because otherwise there's some potential that if values are increase, the state is going to be able to purchase fewer APRs if we keep not dedicating more resources to the program.
Sorry. I was doing two things at the same time and I was bad at both. Yeah, I mean, you're right. The critique is absolutely well-founded. These are policy solutions, not necessary budget solutions. And I see that Deb Habib was also asking about healthy soils. And that's an exact corollary, right? So thanks to public pressure, we won healthy soils last session. But winning healthy soils is a great policy win, just like winning any of these bills would be a great policy win. But insofar as those policy wins have budget corollaries, they're not done because they're not funded. So healthy soils needs to be funded in this budget at some level to make it real. It can be a law in the books, but if there's no money associated, it won't be viable, frankly. Same thing, right? We can increase the purview of APR availability. We could do a lot of things to restructure the program and make it more immediate, more, increase the timing, all of that kind of stuff. But if we open up the spigot to the folks who are available, able to engage with APR, we gotta open up the money available, or it will become its own problem. So we won't have really solved the problem outright. We'll just have solved the problem that we're grappling with, but created a new problem.
Thank you. And a question for Representative Donahue about the food system coordinator position. We talked about how one of the roles of that person would be to develop a set of metrics and to make recommendations for how the state tracks those metrics for the food system over time. And the question is, will the coordinator position explicitly have racial justice goals and metrics built into their work? The questioner's concern is that racial equity goals have to be integrated into every bill and not just those bills explicitly focused on equity issues. Rep. Donahue, are you still with us? Do you want to address that?
Yep, I'm still here. No, I think there's a great point to be made for that bill. We have, just filed this bill last week, so I think it's going through the process, and the committee process would be a great thing to look at, to add that in there, because I think having those equity goals defined by statute would help to guide the position better.
I think that's right, and so that's a good reminder to folks that as we submit testimony, can definitely make bills more explicitly focused on issues that we all feel are important. So that's something, just because a bill is written a certain way doesn't mean you have to say we oppose it this way, or we reject it this way, or we support it this way. You can always submit testimony that makes recommendations of how to make the bill stronger. Recognizing that it's 2 minutes to 4 or 1 minute to 4 and we are losing people, I want to give folks one more chance to ask any questions. Senator Commonwealth, if you're still here, there's a question about 61A for non-contiguous parcels under Chapter 61A. Is there any additional movement at this point to change the 5-acre minimum? Or is it still contingent on all continuous parcels equaling at least 5 acres total? I know this is in the omnibus bill along with some other bills.
Yeah, and I want to shout out to Rep. Schmid, who's really been great on this. I think we have to keep it to 5 acres. You know this, Winton, we've been round and around and around with the lawyers on this. So I think it'll be a 5-acre minimum. The bill is now a 5-acre minimum, but that's where we're gonna land. I'd like it to be smaller than that, but as you know, we were thwarted even with that last session. So I think our job here, and I don't like this particular position, but I think our job here is to really try at this kind of big moment where it seems like there's a huge amount of public pressure to get some wins for farmers and for food security. We need to nail this and then go back and do the kind of continued revision. Because as you know, there's a lot of doubt that this is even a viable, even though you and I think it's viable, there's some contradiction in legal opinions about whether or not this is viable.
That being said, there are several bills that have been filed that are about trying to address that. So that does bring more attention to it. I think most important is the Farmland Action Plan, is getting that passed and getting that process started, is that discussion can be lifted up and we can talk about how the 5-acre minimum is really a very core issue around equity. And it would require a constitutional amendment, but that shouldn't stop us from trying to move forward on it.
I'm totally with you. The action plan that's being carried is really critical. I still think we should continue to raise this, because in raising it, we get to tell the story of how people are farming in the 21st century and putting plots of land together in non-contiguous ways and being penalized for it when they do it. So, you know, we have to continue to do that, even as this much broader vision that folks are holding moves forward.
All right, I want to thank all of our panelists for sticking with us and for presenting. We've got a lot of important bills that have been filed this session. It's going to be exciting as we all work together on them. There's going to be other bills that we're going to be talking about going forward. Please take a look at our website, take a look at that link. And if you're interested in signing on to the white paper, please do so through that form. And thank you all for participating. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Winton. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.